All right, welcome to today's Explainer, everyone. We're stepping into the lecture hall to analyze one of history's absolute most fascinating paradoxes. I want you to just imagine this for a second. A child born in exile, a literal refugee who never learned to read or write a single word in his entire life. Now imagine that exact same illiterate child growing up to build an empire that generated roughly 25% of the entire global GDP. I mean, this isn't just your standard history lesson, it is a masterclass in visionary leadership and statecraft. We're of course talking about Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar, better known to history as Akbar the Great. So how exactly did he transform a fragile, collapsing dynasty into an absolute superpower? Well, let's dive into the evidence and find out.
Okay, really quickly, here is our syllabus for today. First up, from exile to emperor. Second, military expansion and stabilization. Third, strategic alliances and integration. Fourth, administration as modern management. And finally, we'll wrap up with ideology, religion, and legacy.
So, let's jump right into part one, from exile to emperor, securing the baseline. To really understand Akbar, you have to realize his origin story is defined by total chaos. He was born in 1542 in Umarkot, while his father Humayun was a penniless exile. He actually spent his early years entirely separated from his parents. But the real existential crisis hit in 1556. His father died suddenly, making Akbar emperor at just 13 years old. And literally weeks later, the Hindu king Hemu seized Delhi. The Mughal dynasty was teetering on the absolute brink of extinction. But then we get the Second Battle of Panipat. Akbar and his incredibly wise regent, the general Bairam Khan, faced down Hemu's massive army, and the crazy tactical turning point, Hemu was randomly struck right in the eye by an arrow. His army completely collapsed in confusion, Akbar secured the victory, and against all odds, the Mughal Empire was saved.
Moving right along to Section 2, military expansion and stabilization, growing the enterprise. Now, Akbar's military campaigns weren't just about conquest for the sake of conquest. They were calculated tactics of stabilization. By rapidly deploying forces to subdue regions like Malwa, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Bengal, and Kashmir, he secured these vast, sprawling borders, stretching from Afghanistan all the way to the Bay of Bengal. Basically, he eliminated regional threats before they could even unite against him. And crucially, this is huge, at just 19 years old, he completely dismissed his regent, taking absolute, independent, tactical control of the army. He proved right then and there he wasn't just a figurehead. He was a highly capable executive calling the shots.
And you have to see the result of this stabilization because it is a staggering economic metric. By the end of his 49-year reign, the Mughal Empire became the largest economy in the world, producing roughly 25% of the global GDP. Just put that into perspective for a second. 1 in every $4 of value created on Earth happened under his watch. Just incredible. Which brings us to Section 3, Strategic Alliances and Integrations, the corporate merger.
So how do you govern all that without constant rebellion? Think of Akbar not just as a conqueror, but as a modern CEO executing a massive corporate merger. The traditional conquest model back then was ruling through brute fear and slapping religious taxes on people. Akbar completely flipped the script. He realized that to manage an enterprise of India's size, you desperately need buy-in from local leadership. So instead of crushing the proud Hindu Rajput kings, he formed marriage alliances with them. He literally gave their sons high-ranking military positions, and crucially he abolished the jizya, which was the standard tax on non-Muslims. He treated his former rivals as equal stakeholders.
To really anchor this revolutionary policy of inclusion, consider his marriage to the Rajput Hindu princess Jyotibai. Now, the absolute genius here wasn't just the political marriage itself, it was his highly visible respect for her religious freedom. He never, ever demanded she convert to Islam. This was a deeply pragmatic strategy, and it won him the fierce loyalty of millions of Hindu subjects, forging a bedrock of long-term regional stability that lasted for generations. Let's look at how he ran this thing in Section 4, Administration as Modern Management, Standardizing the Empire.
It is actually wild how we can see undeniable parallels between his 16th century empire building and modern organizational management. Look at this. He introduced standardized weights and measures, which are essentially modern quality control protocols. He implemented a uniform administration across these vast, completely disconnected provinces. That is literally corporate standardization. And by reforming taxation and ditching the jizya, he created equitable revenue models that incentivized economic growth and participation rather than just breeding resentment.
But, as they say, you can't manage what you don't measure. For us historians, our greatest primary source for this entire era is the Ain-i Akbari.
This was meticulously compiled by Akbar's closest advisor, Abu Fazl. It was basically the ultimate corporate ledger, documenting everything from provincial revenues to imperial geography. Abu Fazl essentially cemented Akbar's ideology of a perfectly ordered, uniform state right into written law.
Finally, let's hit our last pillar today, Section 5, Ideology, Religion and Legacy, Centralizing Authority.
So Akbar fostered a culture of just unprecedented intellectual inquiry. He welcomed Portuguese Christian priests, Jain monks, Zoroastrian priests, and Hindu scholars all into his court. To facilitate this, he actually created the Ibadat Khana, a house of worship specifically designed for intense philosophical and religious debate. He even physically manifested this incredible fusion of ideas by building a massive, magnificent red sandstone capital city called Fatehpur Sikri. It beautifully blended Hindu, Persian, and Islamic architectural styles into one unified vision.
Now, Akbar's most controversial and famous experiment was the Din-i-Ilahi, which was a syncretic spiritual path blending elements of all those major world religions. But as students of history, we have to view this not just as some personal spiritual quest. This was a highly calculated mechanism of statecraft. By positioning himself right at the center of this new moral framework, Akbar sought to bypass sectarian divisions entirely and centralize political authority directly under his own unshakable leadership to control his incredibly diverse subjects.
However, managing an empire of that magnitude takes a really severe personal toll, and unfortunately his final years were shadowed by immense tragedy. In 1586, his beloved court poet and close friend Birbal was killed in a military disaster. And honestly, worse still, his own son, Prince Salim, rebelled against him, going so far as to order the assassination of Akbar's closest advisor, Abu Fazl. It was a betrayal that reportedly just broke Akbar's heart. After ruling for 49 incredible years, Akbar passed away in 1605 from severe dysentery and was laid to rest in Sikandra, in a magnificent tomb that he actually designed himself.
So, as we conclude this explainer, I really want to leave you with a question to evaluate. We've just studied an illiterate refugee who doubled the size of a collapsing empire, completely standardized its administration, and championed a revolutionary model of inclusive governance over brute force. Based on all the evidence we've seen, what was the true long-term impact of those inclusive policies on the subcontinent? Does this incredibly complex ruler truly deserve the title of the greatest king in Indian history? I want you to really analyze the data on that, and let that question spark you continued study. Thanks so much.